it's Reed from Blueberry Quilts. I'm here with one of Blueberry Quilt's first short videos. And today we're going to be talking about how to hand sew binding to the back of the quilt. So one of the reasons that I like this method is because look at how nice that looks on the back. You absolutely can't see at all that it's been sewn on there. And then look how nice it looks from the front. And even on the corners, you get that nice point. And unfortunately, I can't show you this quilt because it's a magazine quilt that I'm working on, but I am going to show you how I go about applying the binding to the back. So one of the first things is you have to sew your binding on to the edge. The raw edges are to the raw edges, and you sew it at 1/4 inch. And then I take an iron and I press it like that in the direction that it's going to go. And then I take binding clips and hold the binding in place so that I don't have to wrestle with it as I'm sewing. One thing that's important is to have thread that matches the background of your quilt. So I have a white background and I have white thread, and the reason you do that is that's what causes it not to show along the edge here. So when you're first starting out, you tie a quilter's knot at the end of your thread, and you just take a tiny little bite underneath the back side of the binding here, and make sure that it doesn't show through to, that one is going to show through. You got to make sure it doesn't show through to the front of the quilt. So it's just a tiny little bite like that, and then pull it through. And then right where the thread is coming up, you take your needle and go into the back of the quilt. And I have my other finger underneath here so I can feel if the needle is poking out to the front. And then you want to take just the tiniest little bite into the binding like that, so you can check to make sure that you haven't gone into the front. And you take a tiny little bite into the fabric like that and just push it through and pull. And then you go to where the thread came out again, and you put your needle in right where it came out into the backing and the binding, but not going through to the front. Again, you can feel with this finger whether it's going through to the front. Take a tiny little bite out of the top of the binding there and pull it through. And you can see how that white thread blends into the quilt backing, which is why you don't see it. And you also don't see it on the gray binding because you're taking such a tiny little bite into the fabric, and that's why you don't see it. So a lot of people don't like doing this by hand, but I find it to be very relaxing because you kind of get into a rhythm of doing it. And you can go fairly quickly, and it doesn't take that long to get a binding done. So I'm just going to keep going like this, taking a bite into the backing and the batting, and then a tiny little bite into the edge of the binding, and go down until I get to the corner. And then I'm going to meet up with you and show you how to do a corner. So now I've sewn down this entire side of the quilt, and I'm a little ways away from the corner. So what you do for a corner is you take and you fold it like that so that the binding is going straight up and making a right angle there. And then you fold it back onto itself so that you get like a nice corner there. And you can put a binder clip there and put another one here. And then you check to make sure that you have that nice mitered corner, which we do. So now I'm taking another stitch here and I'm approaching the corner. Take another one. We'll take one more. Again, notice how I'm taking just a tiny little bite into the binding. Okay, now this next stitch is going to go right where the thread came out, and then it's actually going to come up into the very tip of this binding, like right. Move that out of the way a little bit. It's going to come up right there, right on the tip of that binding. You pull it through. Unfortunately, my thread is sticking for some reason. And then your next stitch is going to be now on an angle where the thread came out. And you go right in there, taking a bite of the backing and right tiny little bite on the edge of the binding there. Pull that through. And then again, you're going to go right where the thread came out and take a tiny little bite. See how those threads just kind of get buried there? You don't see them. And then we're going to take another bite where the thread came out. And then the last one is going to go right here in the corner. So again, I'm going to take a bite where it's coming out, where the thread is coming out, and then I'm going to come out right in that corner there. And then I'm going to take and turn the quilt now, this direction. And then right where the thread came out again, I'm going to go in there, right where the thread came out, in between the two layers of binding, and come out right in that corner there. Sometimes I use my fingernail to push the needle through. And see how nice that corner is? Ideally, that should line up perfectly. I didn't quite get that right, but then you have that nice mitered corner there. And then now where it came out in the corner, you just start there again, putting your needle where the thread came out and start stitching down the next side of the quilt. So that is how I hand sew the binding. And I hope you've enjoyed this short video of Bluebear Quilts, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.